Welcome to the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where you will learn top strategies from world-class real estate investors, both large and small. Why not? Tune in and get started today.
I've been collecting a lot of big checks, and I was a notorious spender. You saw me in that suit. That suit was a $3,500 suit. I have no business at 28 buying like a $3,500 suit. I realize this now. So I started doing this new thing where I have an account with all my savings in it, and I can't access that account unless I walk into the bank. So every time I get paid, 80% of what I make goes into this account that I have no access to. Like yesterday, I was in New York. If I needed that money in New York, I'm SOL. I can't get it. I'm not going to make that purchase, even though I really, really want it. I'll have to go back to New York. So just creating that savings account for me was huge because we're always taught, hey, you got to invest, invest, invest. But Brian, I went broke investing at one point. I bought too many properties, too much leverage. My hard money payments were like 30, 40 grand a month. So even though I was making really good money, I was keeping very little. I think there is such a thing as going broke investing. But now where I'm like more focused on having a cash position, I can actually invest in other people's deals too, which puts me in a great position. So that's true. Saving is so important. It's not sexy. People don't talk about it anymore, but it is key to a good financial stability.
Hey, what's up, all of my real estate peeps? This is Brian Lucier with another episode of the Why Not Real Estate Podcast, where we interview seasoned real estate investor professionals, both large and small, in the multifamily and other spaces, where my personal belief is multifamily is one of the best asset classes in real estate. And today, really excited to have this gentleman on the show. I met him in one of my trips back to the U.S. in Worcester, Massachusetts. If you're not from there, you pronounce it Worcester. But we saw this beautiful development. This man was dressed to the T's, had beautiful shoes, and I just gravitated right toward him. He was very presentable. I started to talk to him, and now we're going to have him here on the show as a guest. I'm very excited. So let's do this. So our guest today is an Italian-American who's only been in the United States for 7 years and has skyrocketed his career as a real estate entrepreneur. He speaks Italian, Spanish, English, and his passion is real estate. He started his first business at 18 years old and then quickly realized he wanted to invest his profits from those businesses into real estate. After learning more and more about the real estate industry, he decided to completely change his career path and do real estate full time. Our guest now runs 5 businesses, and just talking to him in the green room, he says that number is growing, but we'll just hit the top 3. He has the Epifani Team, which handles real estate sales, both commercial and residential, in the Boston area and other states. I went to his website. He has Epifani Construction LLC that handles all the contracting work for his development, and Epifani Management LLC, which is a consulting company for property managers and landlords. Our guest is always open to networking and connecting with more people in the real estate space and welcomes you to reach out to connect with him after the show. Our guest is also a licensed real estate broker and sales agent in Massachusetts and Connecticut. You got to say that correct, not Connecticut, it's Connecticut, of the Epifani Team and founder of multiple Epifani entities. He's also a top leader in luxury sales and leases through his company he owns, Boston City Properties. Ladies and gentlemen, all of my real estate peeps, it is my pleasure to welcome to the show today, Marco O. Epifani. Marco, welcome to the Why Not Real Estate Podcast.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate the warm intro.
It's my pleasure, and I'm very excited. And, going through doing the research, I always feel a little bit like a stalker when I prepare for the show because I'm going through your social media and your websites and all that. And it's like, wow, this guy has, like on rocket fuel, projected himself out in 7 years. Is 7 years correct?
Yeah, so I came to America 10 years ago, And 7 years ago, in 2018, I got my real estate license. And that's when I started like dabbling into this field, which I'm really passionate about now. But yeah, it's been 7 years. Time flies, Brian. I was 18 yesterday, you know.
Yeah, I was 18 like 100 years ago.
Oh,
So you started in real estate when you were 18.
yep.
Yeah, I didn't start in real estate till I was 38.
Wow, that's
So,
crazy.
yeah, well, you're going to blow the doors right off me just on trajectory alone. I mean, the numbers are there. I mean, okay. So if it's all right with you, I love to get started. I know I only have you for about 5 hours today, and I want to make every minute in this interview. So if it's okay with you, let's get started.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
All right, so you're in real estate now, but can you tell us a little bit about what you used to do before becoming a real estate entrepreneur?
Absolutely, Brian. So that's a really interesting story. When I was 19, I was a sophomore in college, and I could just tell it wasn't for me. I was going for architecture, so I loved buildings. I loved the idea of designing buildings and stuff like that. But then I remember Googling how much the average architect makes, and I was like, I can't live on this. I want more. So that's where it started. So then I was looking at all these businesses, and I was a kid. I was dumb. This was now like 8, 9 years, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I started my business journey. So obviously, like every 18-year-old, Brian, the first thing I did was Google how to get rich quick because I thought that was the way to do it. And I remember my first business was in cryptocurrency. So I was buying Bitcoin and Ethereum and I was trying to trade it and make money. And somehow, Brian, I lost money on my first business buying Bitcoin at $3,000. How? I don't know. If I held it, it's like at 100 and change now. But I was a kid, I didn't have discipline. I didn't have persistence. I was a kid. I was trying it out. When I didn't get rich quick, I quit, and I think on that business, I lost like maybe 15, 20 grand, which now isn't a lot of money. But at the time, my net worth was 3 grand.
Oh,
So,
God.
so I lost 20. So I was way behind the starting line. And then I tried a couple other businesses, and then I was sitting down with a really, really good friend of mine, Carlos. And Carlos was wealthy. Like I just knew he was well off. He owned a few businesses, he made really good money. And I was like, Carlos, I want to get rich. What do I do? And for him, it was so basic. He goes, well, you're good at talking to people. Why don't you sell real estate? And I was like, oh my God, sell real estate. Of course. How do I do this? So I did a quick Google search, and that winter I was torn between doing two things. I was thinking about plowing driveways in the winter because I figured, hey, I can make $100 per driveway. I can work 24 hours in a day. I might be able to make 3, 4 grand in a day doing this. And real estate sales. And I was bartending on the side to like make some cash. So then I went online and I Googled how much a truck was. And then I went online and I Googled how much my license would be. And I was like, oh my God, this is going to be 500 bucks. The truck was 40. Like this is easy decision. So I signed up for the class. I jumped right into it. And then I started off working for a few big companies. So I started off with Remax, and I wasn't getting the training I needed. Nothing bad to say against that broker, but like as a new real estate agent, I feel like a lot of people are not giving the support and systems that they need to be successful. So then I tried working for a different broker, Boston City Properties, Dan, and I worked for Dan for probably like 8 months, slightly better. You know what I mean? Like he was like, Marco, do this to get deals. But then the money wasn't there. Like the split was terrible, and I was driving an hour to Boston every day to like try to do rentals or try to get listings, and it wasn't worth it. So then I kind of narrowed down a little bit more, and I was like, okay, if I'm gonna pick up a client, and NAR, the National Association of Realtors, puts out this data. On average, the average residential homeowner will buy or sell a house every 7 years. So that means all this effort that I'm putting in, I'm only going to get paid on it once every 7 years. I was like, no, 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 there's got to be a better way. So I was talking to Carlos and he goes, oh, I buy a ton of real estate. And I'm like, huh, great. What are you looking for? So I started working with him, and then he kind of taught me the investing game a little bit. And yeah, I just started working almost exclusively with investors. And working with investors, I do two types of transactions. I do a lot of multifamily stuff, and I do a lot of high-end homes that are just flipped or new construction. So it's been really good for me. I feel like I'm not really chasing clients, but I have a lot of clients that are coming to me now. And you know what? It's the 15th. 16th. I've done like 3 million in sales so far this year. So it's going well.
So there's room for growth.
There's room for growth. Yeah, there's lots of room for growth. Yeah.
So besides Carlos, were there any other influences when you were growing up? Like you didn't mention anything about your family or what your family did. Were there any other influences that maybe pointed you towards real estate?
Honestly, man, like it's hard to say. I grew up in Italy, right? And growing up in Italy, I grew up in a building built in the 14th century. Okay, beautiful building I grew up in. So growing up there, I always had this passion about buildings, which is why now I'm getting into new construction stuff as well. I've always been very, very passionate about this, but there is nobody in my family that did real estate. There is nobody that, really guided me and took me through the process. It was really trial by fire. I would do a bunch of stuff. None of it would stick. I'm like, time to try some more stuff. Like I remember in the beginning of my career, I was writing 3,000 letters a day, just sending them out. And I would do that for weeks at a time and not get a single lead. Then I'm like, okay, I know direct mail works because online they say it works, but I'm doing something wrong. Let me try a different script. Let me try a different call to action. Let me try a different lead funnel, and slowly like I started building these systems that kind of worked for me.
Okay. So Carlos was the primary flame to get you started.
Yeah. He was like, hey, why don't you do this? And I was like, oh, when somebody's much more successful than you, Brian, and they give you some advice, like maybe he just said it off the cuff. Like I don't think Carlos really understands the impact he had on my career. But my business had just failed. I was like, Carlos, let me buy you lunch because I heard this one guy say that you have to find the most successful person you know and take him out to lunch. So we got the appetizers, I dragged it out a little bit, let's say. And then Carlos was like, eating. He goes, why don't you sell real estate? And I'm like, huh, brilliant.
Yeah. Like,
And then I got into it.
yeah.
I wasn't gonna question it.
Could you pass the salt? Yeah, sell real estate and the mustard too, please.
Yeah. And then he was really classy. He knew that my first business, failed miserably. He covered the lunch tab too. So like, he's grown to be like one of my really, really good friends. And I kind of met him growing up because he was my friend's older brother. Graduated from business school. He was just a super successful dude. And yeah, he was like, do this. And I was like, say less. And I'm the type of guy, I don't need a lot of guidance. So he kind of pointed me in the direction and I figured out the path.
So he lit the flame, you caught fire, you took off, you did what you needed to do. You mentioned higher end homes and working with investors. I'm guessing that the investors are buying multifamilies.
Lots of multifamilies, lots of flip properties, some commercial stuff.
Okay. And just curious, what kind of properties and deals was Carlos doing?
He was doing multifamily and buying like business spaces.
Okay.
So when I started off, it took me a while to convince him to sell his multifamilies, but two of my first big sales were his properties.
Did
And
you
I went, what was that?
buy them?
No, no, no. I went off market and I sourced two buyers. That's what I did.
Sorry to
You know,
interrupt.
at the time, Brian, that was crazy money. Like I was 19, 20. I think that month I had like three or four closings. I made like 50 grand that month. Like it was a crazy experience just doing that. And then I started seeing money. I'm like, holy shit, this works. Like it really does. So then that's when I started getting really serious about it.
Amazing, huh? That real estate actually works.
Who would have guessed?
Yeah, it's so funny, most people when they're starting out, they'll tell friends, family, oh, I'm going to do real estate. And they say, oh, you're going to crash and burn, you're going to fail. It's like, get advice from people who are doing what you want to do. Don't take advice from people who have never done what you're going to try to do because they're, their stereotype of this whole industry. Like, yeah, that's a whole rabbit trail we're not going to go down because this is your show. So there were no other influences, no family influences. Carlos was the big ticket that got you going. So this one's a bit of a time machine. And for you, 7, 8 years into real estate, some of the people I've interviewed have been in here 10, 20, 30 years. So there's a lot more scope of start to end. So you're within 10 years. This question I always enjoy because it's got two parts to it. The first one is if you could go back in time and say, Marco, you're starting out, do this. What advice would you give yourself if you were starting over? And then the second part of the question, if there's a newbie watching this for the first time saying, oh my God, 50,000 in a month, that sounds incredible. I don't think I could do that. What advice would you give for that newbie who's starting out today? So we'll start with you. What advice would you give yourself if you were starting over?
It's a really good question, Brian. Let me think about that. Okay, I got it. If I could talk to myself for like 7 years past, I would say, Marco, I know you think you're doing a lot, but you're not scratching the surface. At the time, my mind was so limited. I thought that if I did 100 cold calls in a day, that was a lot of work and that I couldn't do anymore. But now I look at that and I'm like, okay, if I'm not like these days, if I'm not reaching out to like 1,500 people a day with my team, I'm slacking. So like before 100 was a lot, now 1,500 is the minimum. So there is that discrepancy. So if I could go talk to myself, I would say, Marco, stop thinking so small. You can do significantly more. You're not even close to your potential because I thought I was close to my potential at 18, 19. I know that sounds crazy. Even now I realize I'm not even close to my potential. But like now I have the awareness. Back then I was a little bit arrogant and I thought I was really doing a lot. I remember one month I had like $2 or $3 million in sales and I felt like the hottest shit ever, Brian. I was like, I'm so cool. And now it's like, okay, that's nothing, you know?
That is really good advice to think bigger. And I've heard this kind of packaged in different ways. Some people would say, oh, I should have started bigger sooner. But you're measuring yourself, not the deals that you were doing, that you weren't giving yourself the mindset you needed to be bigger.
Yeah, I was. I was kind of trapped in this thing where I was busy all the time, but not as productive. So I was just going, going, going. I was like, I'm doing everything. I can't do anything else. And now I'm looking back at it and I'm like, you weren't doing anything, kid. Like, you know?
That's the trap we all fall into. I call it busyness versus business. If
Yeah.
I'm checking my emails, if I'm like stapling papers, it's like, oh, I'm doing all this work, but I'm
Mhm.
not picking up the phone, making those sales calls, making those connections. I'm not doing business. Really good insight. Now, I want to flip the coin. If there's someone watching this for the first time, meeting you for the first time on this podcast, what advice would you give to that newbie who's starting out today?
So if the newbie is starting out, I would have to know some information. What's his current financial situation? What's his credit like? What are his goals? I could say this. I think the best move for most people starting off is to house hack a 3 to 4 family. Just very little exposure of capital. Like they can buy a property, at least in my market, for like 15, 20 grand, and they can get a 3 to 4 unit. So I would say buy a 3 to 4 unit, get that experience. You're not going to get rich off your first deal. Nobody gets rich off their first deal. But from the first deal, you get all the experience of managing tenants, managing contractors, managing finances, working with banks. So I think that is really, really good advice. And I preach that. Most of the people who hit me up on Instagram or Facebook or text me or meet me at events are like, hey, how can I get started? I'm like, this is how you do it. You put very little money down, you control a really big asset, and you get the experience. From that experience, then you can go do a million different things. But when you're starting off, it's like the very little exposure to capital compared to like the big leverage that you get and the cash flow that you get. It's really, really good. And then if people wanted to get into sales, I would say sales is so not sexy right now, Brian. Nobody wants to be a salesperson, but I, for one, love sales. It's a lot of fun. I get to help a lot of people and I get to make a lot of money in the process. But people are afraid of sales. Like I talk to some kids and they're like, I don't want to cold call. And I'm like, okay, don't cold call. Don't do it. But like they have all this resistance towards it. I would say if somebody wanted to get started in sales, they got to start prospecting more. And I'm not talking about like doing 20 cold calls in an hour for 1 hour a week and then thinking that you're doing something. Because there's people that are literally cold calling, at least in my team, like 6, 7, 8 hours a day. And if we're competing for a lead and already have experience, then you have to put in effort. That's the only way you can compete.
You bring it. Those are some real golden nuggets. And I want to touch on each one because when you said house hack the 3 or 4 family, I've got 2 boys. And when they were growing up, that is the exact advice I gave them.
Good
And,
advice.
I get goosebumps when I hear you say that. Now, I'm going to layer up on that. If they do it, do a 4 unit because your cash flow will be better. By going up to 4 units, you can do it as a residential loan. You don't have to go commercial. You don't have to do it as a business. And here's the beautiful part of it. If the market is in a good condition, you can do that, live there for 2 to 3 years. If you're young, I mean, when you were 18, this would have been fantastic, right?
It
And
would have
then
been.
refinance, cash out, do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. By the 4th jump, you're at 16 units, and now you can refi all of those, get the dream house, and live your lifestyle and continue to buy properties. That's absolute gold. And the 3 to 4 model for sure. I would do 4s if you can find them. Live there for two.
That's the thing about the four families. They're rare. It's hard to find them compared to a triplex. So I tell people 3 to 4 units because I don't want people to get too fixated on one thing because you're not going to get rich from it, but they want to start as soon as possible.
I'll add one more to that, right? Even if you're in that 4th unit, pay your rent, right? If your rent is going to be 1,000, 1,500, whatever, pay your rent to yourself. Put it in a savings account to use to build equity to do your next deal. Don't touch it. Let the eggs accumulate in that basket and pay your rent. It gets you used to that. I explain this to people all the time. If you have a deduction coming out of your paycheck, you don't see it. You don't think about it. You don't spend it. But if it's there and you have a balance and it's positive and you haven't figured out investing yet, oh, well, maybe I'll just get the steak instead of the hamburger or spend a little more.
Can I add something to that, Brian? And this
Yeah.
is something I started doing super recently. I've been collecting a lot of big checks, and I was a notorious spender. You saw me in that suit. That suit was a $3,500 suit. I have no business at 28 buying like a $3,500 suit. I realize this now. So I started doing this new thing where I have an account with all my savings in it, and I can't access that account unless I walk into the bank. So every time I get paid, 80% of what I make goes into this account that I have no access to. Like yesterday, I was in New York. If I needed that money in New York, I'm SOL. I can't get it. I'm not going to make that purchase, even though I really, really want it. I'll have to go back to New York. So just creating that savings account for me was huge because we're always taught, hey, you got to invest, invest, invest. But Brian, I went broke investing at one point. I bought too many properties, too much leverage. My hard money payments were like 30, 40 grand a month. So even though I was making really good money, I was keeping very little. I think there is such a thing as going broke investing. But now where I'm like more focused on having a cash position, I can actually invest in other people's deals too, which puts me in a great position. So that's true. Saving is so important. It's not sexy. People don't talk about it anymore, but it is key to a good financial stability.
You are bullseye spot on in that you're doing 80%. Never heard anybody doing 80%. Like some of the Asian cultures, in the United States, they say, oh, save 10%, pay yourself 10%. Asian cultures will do 20%. You flip the 80/20 around, you are investing hard in yourself.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, well, I can live, see, this is the thing, Brian. I set myself up in a way where I can live off the 10 to 20%. I don't need that much money. Like if I'm spending 10 grand a month, like that's a lot of money to be spending. Sometimes I don't even spend all of that. Sometimes I just keep moving it. you
Well,
know?
I do got to give you some credit. The $3,500 suit is an investment in you as well. Like
Yeah,
you're not going to walk in and do that $5 million deal wearing a t-shirt and blue jeans.
you're not.
You're not going to vibe with that seller or the mindset of the person who owns that asset. So you kind of have to play the part of your client, right? If you're dealing with a contractor, show up with jeans and a t-shirt. If you're dealing with an investor, show up looking like an investor. If you're going to City Hall, wear jeans and a t-shirt.
Yes.
Do not walk into the inspector's office wearing very nice shoes. You want to wear work boots. You want to dress like him so he can relate to you and not say, oh, I'm just going to make you pay for everything. You need sprinklers, right?
Yeah.
I want to get to the not sexy sales part. And again, that's mindset. All of us are in sales. I don't care, right? If you're in the supermarket trying to pick this onion to that onion, there's sales involved with that. If you're buying a car or anything that, even your phone service, your IT service, whatever it is, there's sales behind all that. And I think the sooner people get over themselves and say, oh, I don't want to sell, but you have a preference, right? You have no problem expressing your preference. And then I've got tons of Brian Tracy's books behind me. Sales, 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 sales. And you're not selling somebody, you're providing them with an opportunity for their growth.
Correct.
And if you can wrap your head around that, hey, I'm not selling you something, I'm showing you a path to a better way of life. Like,
You know what's crazy, Brian? You say that. I often am the closer for some people on my team. Like they'll bring me to appointments. And I went to this crazy appointment, really, really cool appointment. This guy was a multi-millionaire. He had bought this 200-acre parcel. He subdivided 12 acres into 12 lots and was interested in selling the lots. And I walked through the appointment, and this guy, like like probably worth, if I had to guess, okay, 250 million. Right? So I'm walking through this property and I finished the appointment. I'm like, by the way, how much you want for this? He goes, I don't know. And I'm like, okay, think about it. Let me know. And I leave the appointment and I'm in the car with, one person from my team. And he goes, Marco, what was your strategy there? I was like, what do you mean? He goes, it seemed like you didn't really care. And I was like, Bill, here's a secret. I don't really care. Like if I get the deal, great. Like I'm talking to somebody that's worth like that much. He probably doesn't care about this deal either. I'm not going to care more about a deal than he does when he owns the property. I'm going to offer him an opportunity. If he takes it, great. If he doesn't take it, great. My life won't change. His life won't change. But there's a mutual respect with that.
and people at that level, and even first-time home buyers, they can, I mean, people think, oh, I'll be able to say this and that, and they won't know my true intention. That's not true at all. When you're talking to someone, they're going to see right through it. And if you went in there too hungry, he would have seen that and said, oh, he probably would have got a bad vibe. But, you met him at his level, right?
Yep.
He wasn't too anxious. You weren't too anxious. Okay, now you guys can talk and have a conversation. And
That guy was a ride, Brian. Like I genuinely enjoyed his company. I did.
now you did something else really, really smart that I want to put a spotlight on. In negotiation, the one who names price first is usually at a disadvantage.
You know what's funny, Brian? He asked me for price. And you know what I offered him? I told him, I forget his name. I was like, how much you want for this? He goes, I don't know. You hit me up, make me an offer. And I'm like, look, man, if I'm gonna make an offer, it's gonna be 4 sacks of potatoes and a bottle of gin. And then we could do the whole song and dance. But if you tell me a price, I might be able to give it to you. So I really like the idea of offering non-material things first. Because if you offer somebody 4 sacks of potatoes when they're expecting $1 million, first, it's gonna build tons of rapport. Second, it's gonna make them laugh. Third, it's gonna make them see that like you're open-minded. Like nobody's offered them like on a multi-million-dollar parcel 4 sacks of potatoes and a bottle of booze. Like it just doesn't happen, you know?
I'm stealing that one. That was good.
Yeah, do it. It's so funny to do it, especially when they're all anxious, waiting for you to say a number and you hit them with some absolute out-of-pocket stuff. It's hilarious.
It's so funny that we're talking about this because yesterday my leasing team, we're leasing out an apartment and, the layout on this unit, you got to walk through a bedroom, right? So there was some pushback from the candidate. The candidate says, well, I don't want to pay what you're asking. I'd like to make an offer to pay less. And nobody said any numbers. So my team comes back to me and said, what should we offer? I says, we don't offer anything. We ask them what do they feel would be a fair and reasonable price.
Yep. And then we get commitment.
You know what she said?
What?
4 sacks of potatoes and a bottle of booze.
That's what she said?
No, no, no. I'm teasing you there.
Wait,
But
but that's a good anchor. That's a really good anchor.
you know that I hope my team watches this one later because that was really good. But yeah, somebody asks you a price, you ask them back a question. What do you think it should be? What do you think is fair? And then that just opens up the conversation to get inside their head what they think is fair. And this isn't, like some foo-foo trying to manipulate people or anything like that. I mean, I'm reading a book right now. It talks about loss aversion and gain and, how people perceive a transaction and all that. And it's kind of counterintuitive to what you might think. So everybody's got something to gain in a deal. Everybody's got something to lose in a deal. So if you can kind of meet them where you are, just like you did, you met this guy, he was calm, you were calm. It was like, okay, we're the same vibe. It was easy to say to this guy worth more than you and I combined,
Right.
sacks of potatoes and a bottle of booze, right?
Hey, I promise you nobody else has offered him that on a building.
Yeah,
And he enjoyed it. He got a kick out of it.
probably never forget that.
Probably
I'm
won't.
curious. Since that conversation, have you run back into him and done deals with him?
So this was last Saturday,
Okay.
and I told myself that I was going to sit on it because he didn't know what he wanted. And he struck me as a very intelligent seller, if that makes sense. So he struck me as the type of guy that wanted to do his own due diligence before giving me a price. After talking to him, because I spent like an hour with him, I think the best case scenario is I help him out as an operator. Unless he just wants to let go of the buildings, in which case I'll buy them. But I'm shooting to make like 25 to 30% margins on any property I buy. So like either I can partner with him, and that would be a good contract for me, building a whole subdivision with like 12 to 16, big colonials. It's a really good deal, And I think the value I can provide him is he runs other businesses, he owns other properties. This is a little bit far for him. It's 2 minutes from my partner's house. So I could like manage and do the operations on it, and then we could split profit. So that's likely what I'm going to pitch to him. But I'm going to wait. I'm going to let it sit for a little bit, see how he feels about it.
So you're going to add value.
I'm going to do, yeah.
So smart. So I'm curious. You talked with him for an hour. Did you build rapport, find out like, does he like sports? Does he like wine? Does he like XYZ? You don't have to answer that on this podcast. Please don't, because this is your secret sauce. But if you found out something personal about him, you can reach out to him at a personal level, nothing to do with the deal. It says, hey, you mentioned this bottle of wine, but whatever, send him a bottle of wine. Nothing to
Yeah.
do with the deal.
Right? Nothing to do with the deal. I do find I have mixed feelings about giving gifts because I don't like flattery, you know? So like gift giving, unless it's something personal that doesn't cost a lot of money, in that case, I'd be open-minded to that. But my secret to building rapport is just I match their energy and that's it. Somebody super high energy, I'm like, let's go, super high energy. I have an appointment tomorrow. This guy, just had a really bad injury, hurt himself. I'm going to be a little bit softer. I'm going to be a little bit more quiet, a little bit more tactful on that one. Like I'll give you an example. When I met this guy, he started swearing within the first 30 seconds. I immediately loved him because I also swear often, but he goes, let me show you this fucking property. I'm like, fuck yeah. So I matched his energy on some level. So, and then it was like easy. He was like, my people, he's significantly older than me, but like, even though there was that massive age gap, we were kind of able to close it because of that.
So, and I like your comment about gifts because that, at some level might feel a little eh. So, but is there information? You said he runs several businesses, say, hey, I was watching this podcast the other day about tax savings and blah, blah, blah. Here's a link to it. Maybe you might like the episode. Something like that, something that can help him and add value in your relationship with him. And it's not this reciprocity thing where now he owes you a bottle of wine or something. Take that off the table. So the mindset for the sales, and that's for the newbies. And yeah, you got to kind of sell yourself out there too. You have to tell people, I am a real estate investor. I'm an entrepreneur. I buy this type of property. Here's my buy box. You gotta have that. You gotta know that. Just like I like Italian food, and I like sitting on the end of the table because I'm left-handed. Those are the things you know. Your investing language. You got to know that, and you got to just expose that because you never know who's sitting next to you in that restaurant or whatever. It's like so many times I'll be down at the gym and I'll hear a couple of guys start talking about a real estate deal. And it's like, okay, you've said a couple magic words. I'm listening to your conversation right now. I'll stay out of it, but you never know who you're standing next to. And you got to be prepared when that moment happens to be able to present yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
What other advice would you give to the newbie starting out?
Hmm. Dress better. That's a good one. It's a classic one. I see people showing up to networking events in like jeans and a t-shirt or sweatpants, and I'm like, no, dude, like
Yeah.
that's like you're gonna get treated that way. You want to be a sweatpants type of dude, fine. If you're super successful, nobody's gonna care what you're wearing. But if you're starting off and you're trying to make something of yourself and you want to be taken seriously, take yourself seriously. Take your image seriously.
Do
You
you
know,
remember? Do you remember the first thing I said to you?
what'd you say?
Those are incredible shoes.
Yeah,
I saw your shoes. They were like
monk strap.
a light tan, like kind of the color of my skin, but they were beautiful shoes. And I just remembered that your shoes are fantastic. It's okay. Here's a guy who knows his worth. And because you put it out there that way, I mean, if you can't do the $3,000 suit, get a nice pair of shoes.
But even the suit, like you can buy a $200 suit, get it tailored for $100, and it looks like a $2,000 suit.
Yeah.
It's all about how much you care. This is one of my favorite things, Brian. It doesn't have to be expensive to have style. Have you ever walked into some really wealthy people's homes and you're like, oh my God, the decor here is atrocious? But then you walk into like a guy's apartment that makes, 20, 30 grand a year, and it's so stylish, it looks great. It doesn't take a lot of money to have style. You just have to care, and you can't buy style either. I look at some of these influencers and celebrities and I look at what they wear and I'm like, oh my God, where did we go wrong? At what point did we trade in the suit and tie for like, some super baggy pants or some rubber shoes? Like, you know,
SpongeBob pajamas, right?
it's crazy, man.
Okay.
It's crazy.
News flash here. No one's going to write you a check for $1 million if you come in to the networking event wearing pajamas.
They're not.
Unless you're Hugh Hefner and you look that way, but the
Right, and hear
SpongeBob.
me out, Brian. If somebody owns like 100,000 units and they want to pull up in sweatpants, like nobody's gonna care that they're wearing sweatpants. But if you're starting off and you want to be taken seriously, like put in some effort to your appearance. It's important. People judge you on it.
Yeah, at least iron the t-shirt, right?
The minimum, yes.
Really good stuff. So mindset on the sales and, presenting yourself well as sales too, right? I mean, just looking better starts the sales process without you even saying a word. And yeah, I mean, I'll say it again, your shoes were fantastic, and that's how we started our conversation. Now here you are on the show. So in your 7 years of mastery here, what's the biggest hurdle you've had to overcome as a real estate investor, and how did you solve it?
I can tell you what the biggest hurdle is, Brian. I'm not sure I solved it yet. I still deal with this.
Okay.
Um, I think one of the hardest things in real estate investing is building the team. Like you don't think about this when you're going through it, but like you need a massive enterprise to even just do a few deals a year. I'll give you an example. You need your insurance broker, you need your attorney, you need your lender, you need your agent, you need your contractor, you need your plumber, you need your electrician, you need your framer, you need your like it's so many different people, and you have to rely on all of them. You can't do everything. If you do everything, like I mean, I guess you can, but then you're never going to scale, right? You're going to do 1 to 2 flips a year. You're going to do all the work yourself. You're going to do just fine. You'll make $250,000 a year. But if you want to scale, you need a lot of people in your corner. So for me, the biggest struggle has been getting all the people in my corner and getting them to work seamlessly together. And I'm starting to make strides, but I don't think I have it completely figured out.
You've nailed it. I mean, my biggest challenge organizing my teams is the communication between teams. And, I solve it real quick with a couple of questions. If you came to me and say, hey, we have this problem, how are you going to fix it? Or what are we going to do? Or how are you going to deal with that? Because if my team runs to me or if your team runs to you and you're always solving the problem for them, they're never going to get to the level where they will solve the problem for themselves. They're always going to say, oh, well, Marco will solve this problem for me. I'll just wash my hands, give it to him, wait for the answer, be passive, and then do what he tells me to do. That's not the team person you want. You want the person like Mike on my team. Absolutely perfect. He is 100%. He'll come to me and say, okay, we have this issue, HVAC, heating, whatever. We could do this, we could do this, we could do this, and I suggest we do this. And I say, great, fine, get an estimate, give it to the landlord, let's figure it out. When can we get it done? Right? I'm a better manager if I'm asking questions than telling people how to do their job.
Absolutely, Brian. Yeah. And there's so many people, like even him with the HVAC guy. Now, let's say you don't have the right HVAC guy and he wants to charge you 27 grand. Now you have to go out. You're like, okay, time to start over on the HVAC guy. Maybe he gave me a great price last time, but now he's doubling his prices. So then you have to go through the list. You have to call all the HVAC guy. You got to put that into your new CRM with all your contractors. Like there's a lot of work in building your team. Even agents, like I'm an agent, so maybe I see this a little bit more. But I'm always doing the agent's job. And I'm thinking about like these poor buyers. I'll give you an example. One transaction I closed recently. I'm not going to say his name because he might see this. But I'm doing this deal. He didn't show up to the open house. I sold the buyer the house during the open house. Buyer submits an offer, puts him as an agent. Great. Happy to pay this guy a commission, if this was actually his buyer. But I was the procuring cause of sale. So then we go through the entire transaction. At some point, I just decided to like forego him entirely and just like work with his team. So I'm calling the lender, I'm calling the attorneys, I'm scheduling the closing. And then I call him, just out of courtesy. I'm like, hey man, I had just spoken to the lender. The lender's like, yeah, we're closing on Monday. I speak to the attorneys. Yeah, we're closing on Monday. I call him on Friday. I'm like, hey man, how are things looking on your end? He goes, I'm not sure. Let me touch base with my buyers. And I'm like, hey, your buyers are closing on Monday. Like, but most people don't even see that level of communication. And some deals fall through because of that. For me personally, I like to take responsibility for the entire sale. If I have money on the line, I'll do whatever. Like, I'm not going to let one bad apple, I'm not going to let one unprofessional person ruin the transaction for me. I'm just going to spearhead it.
Yeah, I mean, back to my team. I mean, and you're spot on. You took the bull by the horns. You did what needed to be done. And I'll say this. I mean, a little flag goes off in my head as soon as one of my team says, "I'm waiting for." It's like, no, you can't wait. You have to go after it. If somebody has your answer, you need to pursue it. I don't care if you're using Boomerang, if you're texting them, whatever it is. If you need to set up reminders to yourself, you need that answer, and you need to kind of be a pain in the butt until you get the answer. You could be a nice pain in the butt, but you need to be there and get the answer. Don't wait 2 weeks to find out if they're going to take the unit, because we could be 2 months down.
24 hours. Yeah.
I like 24 hours. Hey,
24 hours. They don't put in the application, they don't sign the lease, the next one. I'm not wasting time. Like vacancy is money. Biggest expense we have in real estate investing is vacancy.
Yeah, the world. I like that. The world spun once. You're done.
Yeah, straight up. What are you waiting for? If they were sure about the unit, they would have signed right away. If they're considering other options, then I also got to consider other tenants.
I got to have my team watch this because you're speaking some real truth here. So we're flying through here, but that's okay. We're doing really good on time. Was there a book? I mean, Carlos turned you on, and then somewhere you started to educate yourself. Was there a book in your real estate investing career that kind of turned the light switch on for you?
There's more than one book, Brian.
We're going to get to those.
There's more than one book. Think and Grow Rich, phenomenal book. Phenomenal book. Actually, I have my copy right here. Let me show you how many times I've read this, Brian.
Yeah.
The book is literally falling apart. I can like take entire chapters out of it. I've read it 7 or 8 times. Every time I read it, I get something new in it. Some of my favorite quotes is, in every failure, there is a seed for greater or equivalent success. So whenever a deal falls through, whenever something bad happens to me, I'm looking into that. I'm like, where can I find the opportunity in this failure? But phenomenal book.
Napoleon Hill.
Napoleon Hill, correct.
Is there a second book that had an influence you as a real estate investor? An influence on you as a real estate investor?
So there's another really good book that I highly recommend. Actually, I'll give you two, okay? There's
Sure.
Your Next Five Moves from Patrick Bet-David.
Yeah.
Book. It's not really real estate based, but
Huh.
it just gives you a really good framework on how you should set it up. There it is. Yeah.
Here's how many times
Look,
I've read it.
it's such a good book. It gives you tactical advice on how to run a business. So there is that. And then I really like The Motive from Patrick Lencioni.
I don't know that one.
Really good one, Brian. It's a quick read. It's a story format. Really, really solid book.
Who's that by?
Patrick Lencioni.
Can you give me a couple pages out of that one? What's the
Yeah. The premise is there's this one guy that runs this company. There's this competitor in a different market. They meet up for coffee. The competitor in a different market is doing significantly better. The competitor from the different market kind of takes him through in what he does. And throughout the end of the book, he realizes that he's not made out to be a CEO. So then this guy buys out his competitor's more successful company with the help of the investors, and he goes back into a sales role and he gives his CEO position out to the other guy. So the premise of the book is different people are good at different things. The idea of owning a business is super sexy, but maybe you're not cut out for it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Work in your genius, work in where you feel really good, where you're strong. And that book really narrowed it down for me. Like I'm really, really good at sales, Brian, and I'm decent at real estate. I'm terrible at business. It's like interesting the dichotomy. I don't really like managing people. I don't really like keeping books. So now I know if I'm starting a business, I need to have those people in place who are really good at that stuff, or the business is going to fail. So that book was really, really interesting from like an operational level on where I fit in and where my weak points are.
That's definitely going to be a read for me. And you said something really smart. I think it was Henry Ford. His job is to hire people smarter than he is, and then give them the tools they need to be successful and get the hell out of the way and let them do the job.
Right? Like, don't ask me to keep books. I'm not going to do a good job. People are just going to get frustrated with me. It's going to be terrible. But if I set that expectation and I find somebody who's much better than me at that, now we can have a successful business.
Fantastic. So we're flying through all this. I'm going to throw you a little curveball here because this one was not on the list of questions. It's never on the list of questions. And the only people who know this comes are the people who watch the show. So we've been talking about a lot of stuff, your businesses and all that. What's the question you feel I should have asked you today that I didn't?
What's next?
That's the next question.
Is it really?
It literally is. So if you like, let's just jump there and then maybe we can come back and revisit this one. So you've got all the Epifani teams and entities all rocking and rolling. They're all doing their things. So what's next for you and why not get started?
So I'm getting started, but it's a lot of work what I'm working on right now, Brian. I'm developing ground up a 16 unit in my town. So that's going to require a lot of capital and a lot of management. So I don't think I'm going to buy a lot of properties this year. I mean, if I find a really good deal, I might cave and still buy it. But I'm telling myself that I'm not going to buy any more deals until I finish this one. The goal with it is to build it with no debt. I know.
Unpack that. That's an interesting story.
Very interesting, right? I feel like if I get the debt, I'm not going to be able to do all the cool things that I want with the building because the bank won't finance them. And I was also thinking long term, I'm not going to regret owning this building outright. And if I just take my time and I build it right and I make it a really beautiful building, I think it's going to be worth like 3 to 4 mil. I think it's going to cost me 1.5 to 2 to build it, and I think I'll cash flow like close to 300 grand a year from this one building if I build it with cash. So it'll take me 4 to 5 years to get my money back, but with that kind of bankroll just from passive income plus all my other properties, like I'll be able to start building stuff every year with just my own funds and none of the bank's funds, none of my partner's funds, just my own money.
So you're going to build this property for a quarter of a million a door ish.
Yeah.
So what's your vision for this property? You said the banks probably wouldn't finance it, so it sounds like, I've seen some of your websites, some of these luxury units that you're dealing with. It's just like, wow, that's so nice. I would like die there. It's so beautiful. What's
Yeah.
your vision for your property you're building?
So 16 units, mixed use, commercial, retail, and office with a rooftop bar. I want to do like a fountain in the first floor, a really big fountain. I want to do some crazy stuff. I want to do arches. I want to do cool like little ornaments on the ceiling and stuff like that. And there's no way I'm going to talk to the bank. I'm going to be like, hey guys, I need 200 grand for this fountain. What do you say? They're going to be like, Marco, how much money is the fountain making? And that's going to be that, So I'd rather just do it with my own money, build something really nice, build something that's going to outlast me, Brian. The building I'm using ICF technology, which is rated for 6 to 700 years. So this building is still going to be standing way after I'm dead. People aren't even going to know who built it, but they might still enjoy its use. And to me, growing up in Italy, that's important to me, man. I don't know who built my house in Italy, but I really, really enjoyed it.
I've got a tear swelling up here because I'm seeing your journey full circle. The young boy in that 14th century property that just like gave you so much juice and so much passion about, I love this property. I want to design these things. Now here you are, you're living that young boy's dream, a fountain, a bar on top. I can picture like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon or something. It's
All
like
right, that's the goal. Something cool, man.
something like, this is not some pocket listing on the MLS. This is special.
Yes. And the goal, Brian, is to make enough money where I can only build special buildings. There's no passion in building a wooden box and making 100 grand. I've done it, great money, but there's no passion behind that. Like that can't be your only reason. That can't be your only purpose for living is figuring out how to build as many of those boxes as you can to make profit. There's got to be some beauty in life. And I feel like for me, this is really beautiful. And it's actually going to change the town that I live in. The mayor's really excited about the project. The building department's really excited about the project. They've granted me some variances to make this project a reality. It's going to change the life of everybody who lives in this town for years to come. And that's something I can get behind. That's something that I wake up in the morning and I'm excited for, compared to like, oh, the flooring came in for the new build. Let's hire some people to install it for cheap so we can make more money. Like that's not it, you know?
Yeah, that's the path to get where you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You have to make some sacrifices. You're gonna have to do some stuff that you really don't like doing. But at the end of it, you can really do what you would like to do.
Wow, that's beautiful. Timeline on this. It sounds like you're permitted, you got your variances. Have you broken ground?
No. So I started getting quotes, and it's going to be very, very expensive.
Yeah.
So my goal is to build a ton of capital and then take on this project. But to give you an idea, just a civil engineer to tell me where all the pipes are, he wanted like 30 grand, So I'm saving money right now. I have to get two more variances approved. The first and second floor are going to have an atrium. So the second floor is going to be open to below. And currently in the town that I'm building this, they only allow ceiling heights of up to 15 feet. I want to get 25 feet so that when you're standing in the first floor where the fountain is and you're looking up, you're just looking up at 50 feet with some really cool ceilings. So there's still a couple variances that I have to get approved, and I'm not going to knock down the building that's currently there until I get those approved. Probably a few more months.
Are you taking investors?
Nah, I'm building in cash. Right? That's the beauty of it, Brian. And I've worked with investors before. I have really good relationships with a lot of investors. I don't like raising money. The borrower is a slave to the lender. That's in the Bible.
Yeah, Proverbs. Yes.
Yes, I don't want to be a slave to anybody. I got into this industry because I wanted freedom, and I'm not going to trade my freedom for scale. I'd rather take it a little bit slower and build it right.
And the man who goes to build a tower and doesn't account the cost is a fool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
You're in no hurry. You're in no debt. You can take your time.
right?
When it happens, it happens.
And I own the lot outright. There's a
Okay.
building on it now. So like taxes, I have to pay taxes, which are a few $100 as it is right now.
So who's breathing down your neck? Nobody.
Right. And I feel like if I tried to rush it, it wouldn't come out as nice. So there is that.
So this is going to be your life for a while. And maybe if a deal comes by, you might do it if the numbers look okay.
I'm also working on another really, really exciting project, Brian. So it's that, and then I'm opening up a brokerage for real estate agents, which I'm very excited for. I think it's going to be different than any other brokerage that is currently around. So that excites me.
So I was just looking at the questions here and I got so excited about your story, I jumped over the whole deal part.
Let's jump into it.
Yeah, let's do that. I mean, this will be fun, and then we can wrap it up after this. So this is a couple questions to this. What's the best deal you ever did? What type of property was it? How did you find it? How did you finance it?
Great questions. I'm going to say the best deal I ever did was my first one because it got me into it, and it's all about getting into the game. So the first one, I was writing letters for Carlos because Carlos was looking to buy more properties, and I found one. Super motivated seller. I told the lady I could sell it on the market for 180. She was like, "No, no, no. I want an offer tomorrow." I was like, "Okay, let me call Carlos and make an offer on it." Carlos walks through, offers her 120, and he goes, I'm like, "Carlos, I just told her it's worth 180." He goes, "I know, but offer her 120. See what she says." I offer her 120. I put in a 10 grand fee if he got the deal, and she accepted. I'm like, huh, who would have guessed? So Carlos is working on all the due diligence. He calls me 2 weeks before closing. He goes, "Hey man, I just bought another business. I can't close on this." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "This is terrible news." I was really looking forward to this 10 grand. At the time, I had 10 grand in my account. Like that was going to be doubling my net worth in one transaction. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, what am I going to do? Then I called the lady. I was like, "Hey, I have terrible news and great news." She goes, "What's up?" I'm like, "Carlos is buying a business and can't close on this as well." She's like, "Oh no, what am I going to do?" Like, "I'm going to close on it at the same price with the same terms. Do we have a deal?" She goes, "Yes, thank you so much." I'm like, "Yes, I knew it was a good deal if he was going to buy it for 120. I personally thought it was worth 180 as it was, you know? So the problem, Brian, was I didn't have enough money to buy it. So that was a key problem. I had no experience. I had great credit and I had 10 grand saved. So I'm calling everybody I know and I find one hard money lender that's like, "Hey man, if you put 22 grand down, I'll give you the money." So I'm like, "Okay, deal." And I'm like, what did I sign up for? I don't have the money. So then I call everybody and their mother. I was like, "Hey, do you have 12 grand? I'll pay you back in 2 weeks," because I had some big closings coming up.
Okay.
I was like, "Hey, I'll pay you back in 2 weeks now. Hey, I'll pay you back in 2 weeks now. Hey, okay, yeah, I'll do it." I was like, "Oh, you'll do it. Great." So somebody gave me 12 grand for 2 weeks. I gave them back 13 grand after 2 weeks. So they made $1,000. I got to close on the building. And then I didn't have enough money for the repairs, Brian. So I got creative. I recruited a bunch of my friends to come help me. I put everything on credit cards. And then 4 months later, I sold the building. 5 months later, I sold the building and I made 120 grand.
Nice.
So my net worth went from 10 grand, I had 120 grand, and then I used that 120 grand to buy buildings for the people who helped me through the project because they pretty much helped me for free, you know? And then that was the best deal. Did that, bought three more.
What kind of property was it?
It's a two family,
Two
two
family.
family home.
So your all in was 32,
Yeah, like 32, something like that.
32K.
Yeah, I got 10 grand out of my own pocket, 12 grand I borrowed, and like another 10 to 15 on credit cards.
Okay. And the 10 to 15 credit cards was your rehab
Yeah.
and your buddies 6 packs and pizzas, something like that.
Bingo. Exactly. But I treated them well. After we finished that project, I took a third of the profits and I invested them by myself. I took another third and I invested it with them, you know. So
So invested it with them. What was that? What did that look like?
we would find properties, we would try to flip them. I would put the down payment, I would take on the loan, they would manage a project.
So you'd partner with them for helping you out.
Yeah, I gave them their start as well.
Nice, nice. That's that's commendable. That's some people would say, "Oh, thanks," but you said, "Hey, you helped me do this. Let me show you how to fish."
Right. So I taught them how to wholesale. Then when they found some really good wholesales, I was like, hey, do you want to do this project? And they were like, yes. And I was like, I will finance it.
So of those buddies, how many of them are still in real estate today?
All of them.
Nice. That's a win.
Most of them are millionaires as well.
That's a super win. You showed them the path. That's that's a really good story.
Yeah.
Wow. So we talked about how you financed it. You did the hard money lender gave you the money for the down payment, and then you went to conventional lending.
Then I went to Capital One and American Express, and I was like, hey guys, could you increase my limits?
So you actually bought the property on credit cards?
No, no, no. I bought the property with hard money, like you said. But
Like,
then the rehab, I put all on credit cards.
okay, okay. And then how long did you hold it before you exited?
4 or 5 months, not that long.
Call it 5 months.
Felt long when I was doing all the work with my friends.
Here's the fun part for me. So you made 24,000 a month, give or take.
Give or take, I was also like wholesaling and selling properties throughout the process. Like I remember those days I was probably making like after I sold the building, money just started flowing in. It was crazy because I didn't know where it was coming from. But after I sold the flip, like the month afterwards, I had like maybe two sales and a wholesale and I made another 60. Like after that, I just started snowballing. Best way to put it.
Just to isolate this one deal, 24,000 within 5 months, 120K, that kind of resonates really close to what a doctor earns in a year.
Yeah. Quarter mil a year.
Yeah. Not
And that
bad.
was 1920, Brian. I was young.
Oh God.
Right? I couldn't even drink. I remember when I could finally buy the beers for the friends that were helping me do it. It was awesome. I was like, let's go celebrate. Because most of my friends are like 1 or 2 years older than me. So like they would buy the beers and then I turned 21 and I was like, haha, I can do this now.
This has been a wonderful story. And in 7 years, you did all this. Amazing. I mean, we don't know how long it's going to take for you to build that 16 unit. And frankly, you probably don't care.
I don't care. Yeah. I can take my time with it.
Yeah,
What
it's,
I figured, Brian, is if I invest like 100 grand a month into it and it takes me 2 years, that's fine. From when I start.
well, you could start with 4 sacks of potatoes and a bottle of booze.
All right. Bottle of booze might help for the demo. It might.
This has been so much fun. And all this happened like in 7 years.
Yeah.
So you've gone from writing letters with Carlos to fulfilling a childhood dream within 7 years.
Well, I still have to do the fulfilling part, but I set up the childhood dream part. That's in good shape. Now it's just the executing.
So how did the vision for the 16 unit like happen? I mean, you just weren't like sitting at a stoplight somewhere and say, "Hey, I think I'll build this incredible 16 unit." I mean, where did
Brain
it?
system. Brian, this is the last story I'll give you, then I have to go run.
All right.
This is a good story, Brian. So one of my realtor friends hits me up. He knows I'm trying to do new construction. He goes, hey, I have an opportunity for you. Why don't you meet the owner of this restaurant? He has an adjacent building in downtown that he's considering selling. I meet him. This guy takes me to his restaurant, which I know. It's one of the better restaurants in Putnam. Takes me there. Asks me what my story is. I tell him. Like, I want to change the way the world is built. That's really what I want to do, Brian, on some level. I need money to do that. So I do what I do to make my money. But the vision is to change the way the world is built. So I'm telling him like what my goals, my dreams, and my ideas are. And then he shows me the building that he's thinking about selling. And he's like, what do you want to do here? And I'm like, I'm going to knock this down. This stuff is cooked. It needs to get knocked down. So we go back to the bar. He buys me another drink. He goes, why don't you make me an offer for the building? And me, full suit, full confidence. I put my hand out. I say, I'll give you 50 grand. And he looks at me, starts laughing. I'm postured. My hand is out. I'm waiting for him to reject it. I would have rejected it. The parcel is worth significantly more. But he laughed. He said, okay, let's do it. And I'm like, that's crazy. But I think on his end, it was also a very savvy business move because he owns pretty much the whole block over there. And this one building is bringing down the value of his block. So once I do my plan on it, it's going to like almost double his property value. So it really was a win-win. But then it took like a year and a half. And for the first year, I didn't even have a contract on it. Just assumption closed the whole way because we had to split the parcel from his other parcels. It was all commingled on the public record. So for 1 year, I'm just assuming my way through this close. And then at the end of the year, I can finally sign and, paid it outright. It was a crazy deal. And I'm super grateful for them. They are great people, really great people. And to give me this opportunity, I'm infinitely grateful for them. I'm going to do good by it, Brian, and I'm going to make sure their building appreciates a ton in value as well.
Everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
Marco, you have a beautiful story. I can't wait to get this one on. Of course, we'll give you all the footage if you want to use it for any of your marketing. So for our peeps who are watching this show today, how would you like them to get in touch with you?
Instagram is the best channel.
And what's your Instagram?
It's at Marco Epifani, my last name, with 2 I's at the end.
And that's your preferred?
Yep, that's my business card.
That's your business card.
That's my business card.
I think is what you hooked me up with when we were in Worcester. We did the phone thing, and you're on my phone.
Yep.
So this has been fantastic, incredible. Anything else you want to tell us before we let you go?
No, thank you so much for your time, Brian. I really appreciate what you're doing here.
I love your story, and I can't wait to get it out. And this is going to be, I'm just really, really, really happy to hear your story, and I can't wait for my team to hear it as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, Marco O. Epifani with his beautiful 16 unit. I want to get you back on the show when that one's done. And this is Brian Lucier from the Why Not Real Estate Podcast signing off, and we'll see you on the next one.
Bye, guys. Take care.